Welcome to Bryer Showcase. I'm Bryer Cisneros and welcome back to another video. By the time you're seeing this, it's Friday, and that means this will be the last video before Christmas. And it's another pretty big day because by the time I'm recording this is the last time I'm going to be wearing this sweater. So Santa Paws, you served me well, but you know, once Christmas is over, I can't wear you forever. But hopefully all of you enjoyed watching Santa Paws. That's kind of why I have the lights on, you know, just because it's a special occasion. Of course, this is not going to be the last time you'll see it, for at least for you, because earlier I recorded a YouTube short which I'll post on Christmas Day, and that will be the final time you'll see the sweater. But for me, this is the last time I'm going to be wearing this right now. So look forward to that, because once that short is uploaded, that will start the whole week of me uploading at least something on the last week of the year. So again, look forward to those. But let's get into the main topic of the video, and that, of course, I'm going to be showcasing 30 albums from the 1960s. So the 60s, very important year in music. So many things was going on at the time. You had Vietnam, you have the hippie movement, you even have Beatlemania. And to me, the 60s was where music really got good. Of course, there were good stuff before in the 50s and 40s, and if you want to go back to even the 20s. But to me, the 60s was where, for me, the music really became amazing. So of course, I have 30 albums, pretty much like the other videos I've done in the year. Like I did one for the 1980s, I did one for the 1970s. So it makes sense to do one for the 60s before the year ends. So if I want to be honest, when it comes to my 60s collection, it's definitely one of the smaller ones, because you know, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, those three decades are like my go-to area when it comes to music. But of course, comparing just those three, the 60s does kind of fall behind comparing to the 70s and 80s. But I still really enjoy a lot of 60s music. I kind of wish I do have more, but again, I tend to gravitate more towards the 70s and 80s. But hopefully in 2023, I'll change that. We'll be able to build more of a 60s catalog. But I do have quite a lot, and just enough to make a video. So let's do this. So I pretty much have them in alphabetical order. This is not ranked or anything. I'm just going to go through them and give my brief thoughts on them. I'm not going to go too in depth because again, there's 30, so I don't want this video to be too long. So let's get going. So starting off, we have the band, and I'm going with their self-titled, or the Brown album, which I've shown before. This is so far my favorite album by the band. Great stuff here. Of course, you have the first song, Across the Great Divide. Great opening track. Rag Mama Rag. Of course, As the Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. One of my favorite songs ever. Up on Crippled Creek. Whispering Pines. Rocking Chair. The Unfaithful Servant. That's a great song. But yeah, great rootsy, very Americana. Yeah, awesome stuff here. This album needs no introduction, of course. I mean, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. And that, of course, it's Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Again, just what has not been said about this album. It's a masterpiece. I just absolutely love it. And I'll talk more on it in a future live stream with Garrett and Nick. Here's another one that needs no introduction. Of course, there's Abbey Road by the Beatles. I mean, there's so many choices I could use for the Beatles. Of course, the White Album, Rubber Soul, Revolver, but Abbey Road's always been my favorite. Again, you have the first side, which has Come Together, Something, Maxwell Silver Hammer, Octopus's Garden, Oh Darling, and then you have I Want You. But then you have even the medley, of course, which is just a awesome piece. So yeah, Abbey Road goes without saying. Now let's get into an album that maybe not a whole lot of people know, unless you're a huge jazz head, or I don't know what you would call a jazz fan or something. We'll stick with jazz head for now. But anyhow, so I have Bill Evans Trio with Waltz for Debbie. So this is technically a live album. So again, it's just Bill Evans with the other two people in the band. You have Scott LaFaro on bass and Paul Motion on drums. Hopefully I said that right. And it's just the three of them, and it's just six tracks mostly. This CD has some bonus stuff too, but really the real album has just 6 songs, and it's very good. Great jazz stuff. The bass work is definitely worth noting by Scott LaFaro. Just really awesome stuff. And of course the piano, just holding it all together. And even the percussion is also really good. So I recommend this if you want to get into more jazz. This is a good album. Bob Dylan, of course. This is my favorite from the 60s. Of course, is Blonde on Blonde. Again, a lot of songs, 14 tracks. This was a double album originally. And there's just so many iconic songs on here. Rainy Day Women, number 12 and 35. Pledging My Time, Visions of Johanna, I Want You, Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues again. Just Like a Woman. I'm basically naming the whole album, but yeah. Another classic. There's some other ones people could point out, like Highway 51 Revisited. Even some of his more folky, his early folk stuff, I can see people naming them, but this has always been my favorite of the 60s. It's not my favorite Bob Dylan album. I mean, that still goes to Blood on the Tracks, but this is very close. Okay, the Byrds. I'm going with their debut, Mr. Tambourine Man. Although the second album has Turn, 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 another one of my favorite songs, I think as a whole, I think this album's a little bit stronger, but still, both albums are terrific, but I like this one slightly more. I mean, great harmonies here. Of course, this has Gene Clark. Of course, David Crosby's on here as well. But yeah, absolutely very memorable songs. Of course, a lot of covers though, but you know, the Byrds were kind of known for that. You have Mr. Tambourine Man, I'll Feel a Whole Lot Better. Great 2 opening tracks there. But yeah, really great album. Now, next, we have Chicago with their debut album, back when they were called Chicago Transit Authority. Again, great mix of jazz and rock, maybe jazz fusion. Yeah, terrific stuff. 12 songs on here, but again, lots of great guitar work by Terry Kath. The vocals here are fantastic, and of course the horns. When you talk about Chicago, you gotta bring up the horns. Yeah, fantastic stuff. You're gonna find a theme in a lot of my 60s picks that most of them, like a good majority of them, came from 1969, which was a very good year in music. But let's keep going. Of course, Cream. This is my only Cream album. Of course, we have Desiree Gears. I'm pretty sure I butchered how you say it. I always forget how you said Disraeli Gears, something like that. But you know what I'm talking about. Again, Cream, great rock band, one of the first supergroups. If that's true or not, I like to think that's true. But yeah, classic album, very iconic cover too, very trippy, very psychedelic. Yeah, I dig it. Now, obviously, we're going to Creedence Clearwater Revival. Now, my favorite is Cosmo's Factory, but that came out in 1970, so could talk about. I'm pretty sure I talked about it in my 70s video, but it should have been there. But probably my favorite of the 60s goes to my second favorite Creedence album, and that, of course, is Willie and the Poor Boys. Gotta say it right. Yeah, terrific album again. Down in the Corner, great opening track there. It Came Out of the Sky, Cotton Fields, Fortunate Son, classic song. Don't Look Now, The Midnight Special, Effigy. Yeah, great rock album. I mean, Creedence. I mean, I did a whole ranking video on them earlier this year. So you can probably find it on my channel. It's one of my favorite videos I did this year, honestly. Here's another pretty iconic supergroup. Again, this album came out in 1969 originally. We have Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Of course, I talked about David Crosby and the Byrds earlier, so now here is Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Of course, you have Stephen Stills and Graham Nash as well from the Stephen Stills was from Buffalo Springfield, and of course Graham Nash from the Hollies. And together they just have this great blend in terms of their vocals, and very strong album. I definitely really do enjoy this one. I definitely need to listen to it more, because I enjoyed it the first time. Haven't heard that much since, but I do know the songs I really enjoyed. Sweet Judy, Blue Eyes, Merrick, just gotta say it right. How do you say that? I forgot how you say it. Marrakesh Express. I'm going with that. Anyhow, that's a good song. You don't have to cry. Helpless Hoping. 49 Bye-Byes. Yeah, I dig it. I probably need to listen to it again. Here's Deep Purple. Now, obviously, I think they do much better stuff in the 70s, but, you know, the 60s stuff is good for what it is. This is with Rod Evans on lead vocals, not Ian Gillan. But I'm going with their self-titled debut. Well, not their debut, their third album. But yeah, this is probably my favorite of the Rod Evans period. Of course, after this, they would get Ian Gillan, and of course, they would explode from there. But you know, this is still a very strong album. Chasing Shadows is a good song. Blind, Lelena, and of course track 8, April, which is a really good closing track. That was kind of like a good foreshadowing on where they're heading. You can see Ritchie Blackmore is starting to really go for that more hard rock sound. But you know, again, not quite, but still pretty good. Here's another iconic debut. You have The Doors. Of course, you have Jim Morrison, Ray Manzarek, John Densmore, and not Ray, I already said him. What's the guitarist's name? Robbie Krieger. There you go. Yeah, so The Doors, I mean, another iconic debut. Another one of I mean, this is probably one of the greatest debut albums ever. Break On Through, Soul Kitchen, The Crystal Ship. Of course, has Light My Fire, The End. Very great stuff. Another album from 1969, I believe. Yeah, 1969. We have Grand Funk by Grand Funk Railroad, or the Red Album. Again, I've talked about this one not that long ago, but great stuff. Again, that bass, the heavy bass tone, that's the big standout of Grand Funk Railroad. I've always really appreciated. Now here's one I have not shown before, because this one came in recently, because not that long ago I bought this. It's the original album classics, and this one's for the Guess Who. So this has 5 of their albums, and obviously I'm not going to talk about all of them right now, but I will talk about one of them, and this is the only album that was included in this. This one came out in 1969 again. This one's called Canned Wheat. Pretty interesting cover and, you know, title. But this is a really good album. I really enjoyed this. It's just your good, you know, again, late 60s, just your typical rock sort of band. But it has great songs on here. No Time's a great one. Minstrel Boy, Laughing, Undone, Old Joe, Of a Dropping Pin. Yeah, top to bottom, very good album. If you've not listened to much Guess Who, I mean, when it comes to Guess Who, of course we know American Woman, but if that's all you know, I suggest you check this album out. There's some good stuff here. I was impressed, no joke. So yeah, that's the Guess Who. Right, shout out to Nick for this next one. Of course, I did a video on this already, but of course Nick sent me this one. He sent me Butterfly by the Hollies. He also sent me Distant Light, of course, also by the Hollies. But this is the one that came out in 1967. This is the last one with Graham Nash before he would leave. But yeah, very good album, very strong. I'm not going to go too in depth because, you know, I'm going to save my overall thoughts on it for the CD haul. but very good. There's some good. This again, another album that really impressed me because I never heard a full Hollies album, but this is a good one. I enjoy this one. So again, Nick, thank you for sending me this. Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow. I like this one very much. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite album in this whole batch, but still some good stuff. Obviously, to me, Grace Slick is the big standout in this. In this band. The other guys, the other vocalists, they're fine. I like them, but Grace Slick, she's the real star of the band for me. Again, nothing against the other guys, but I just want more Grace Slick. But yeah, but still very good. Again, psychedelic rock, has some classic tunes like Somebody to Love and White Rabbit, of course. But yeah, I dig it. It's not my favorite though. And here's my only Jimi Hendrix Experience album. Of course, we have Electric Ladyland. Again, this is probably my favorite one I've heard. I've heard the other albums on streaming, but this is the only one I was able to buy. I do plan to get the other two, but I'm very happy with this one. It's my favorite one. Has a lot of experimentation here. But yeah, great guitar work. Yeah, I really dig it. Now here's one of my favorite albums here. We have, of course, King Crimson, In the Court of the Crimson King. I talked about this recently in my progressive rock video. Or did I? I can't remember if I did. It might have been Red. But still, one of my favorite album covers, and great, another one of those big, great debut albums ever. This is where prog rock really got its start. But yeah, again, I talked about this before, so I'm going to keep moving. Of course, the 60s was pretty big for the Kinks. This is my only Kinks album, and I know people will say they have better albums than this one, but again, this is my only one in my collection, and I'm only restricted to what I have. So if you want to, of course, if you want to request like another Kinks album, I'm all ears. I do know some of the big ones, like Lola is a big one. So yeah, hopefully in 2023 we'll get more Kinks, but this is my only one. We have Arthur. Or if you want the full title, Arthur or the Decline and Fall of the British Empire. What a mouthful. So I just like to say Arthur, just to keep it simple. But yeah, I was impressed. Another good album here. Victoria, Yes Sir, No Sir, Brainwash, Australia, Shangri-La, title track. Yeah, I dig it. Really good album. Very strong. Again, hopefully I'll get more. Again, back still in 1969. Of course, Led Zeppelin, self-titled debut. Again, just a killer first album. This is one of the greats, like one of the pioneers of what we consider heavy metal. Of course, nowadays this is more hard rock, but for its time, this was heavy stuff. But yeah, Good Times, Bad Times, Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You, Dazed and Confused, Your Time's Gonna Come, Communication Breakdown, How Many More Times. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Mamas and the Papas, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears. Of course, you have California Dreaming, Got a Feeling, Monday, I Call Your Name. And the vocal harmonies, just some catchy tunes, some great feel-good 60s music. Okay, Miles Davis, In a Silent Way. Again, this is where he was going more in a jazz fusion direction. And again, very good one. Really enjoyed this one. There's really two songs on here. You have /Peaceful, and then track 2 is is the title track / is About That Time. So yeah, very good stuff. I'd say it's kind of weird because I have quite a bit of like 3 Miles Davis albums, and very different compared to them, because I have A Kind of Blue, I have this, and I have Bitches Brew, which again, lots of differences to them. but still very interesting stuff. Like Miles Davis is one I want to get into more. So if you have any more albums you want to recommend, please let me know, because I've enjoyed what I've heard from Miles Davis. All right, moving on. Going to the Monkees. Of course, I have this collection, but I'm only going to show one album, and that album is probably my favorite Monkees album as of now. We have Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited. This one really impressed me. Of course, some people will say Headquarters is their favorite, which is understandable. But to me, there's some terrific songs on here. You have Salesman, She Hangs On, Cuddly Toy, Hard to Believe, What Am I Doing Hanging Around? My favorite song on here is Don't Call on Me, which is a Mike Nesmith song, and that's a beautiful song. Very underrated, I must say. But yeah, very good album here. Let's put you back in here. Okay, almost done. Next, we're going with the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. I think I did talk about this one in my progressive rock video. Again, this is like the, this was the precursor of what we know as progressive rock. Some people say this is the first progressive rock album. I can totally see it. Definitely has some of the elements of it. It's one of the earliest concept albums here. Don't think it's the first concept album, but it's definitely one of the more well-known one. Very good stuff though. Orchestration is fantastic. And of course, the songs itself are just really good. So yeah, Moody Blues. Pink Floyd. They started out in the 60s. Here's their debut, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Of course, you have Syd Barrett taking charge here. It took me a bit to really appreciate the whole album because it's very psychedelic. But for what it is, it's pretty good. I like it. Is it the type of Pink Floyd I would grab? I'll grab? Not really. I mean, I'll always go for the more of the 70s stuff. But for what it is, this album's still pretty good. Rolling Stones. My favorite one of the 60s, Let It Bleed. Of course, my favorite Sticky Fingers, but this one comes in close second. I talked about this one in the live stream I did with Garrett and Nick. But yeah, classic album. Of course, it starts out with Gimme Shelter. To me, Gimme Shelter is probably the best opening track on any Stones album. Like, that's just an awesome song, and everything else is also almost as good. Love in Vain. Title tracks is pretty good. You Got the Silver, which is a Keith Richards song, and that's really nice. Monkey Man, a great underrated song. And then it finishes out with You Can't Always Get What You Want. Like classic stuff. Santana, they got their debut here. Another good album, very jazzy, very Latin rock. Yeah, very good. I mean, Santana, what a great guitarist he is. Simon and Garfunkel, the last one they released in the 60s, and that of course was their fourth album, Bookends. My favorite is Bridge Over Troubled Water, but that came out in 1970, so we're going with this one. And this is probably my second favorite Simon and Garfunkel album. Yeah, Mrs. Robinson, Hazy Shade of Winter, let's see, America, Save the Life of My Child. Very good. And we have two more to go. This was another one I got recently, actually maybe 4 or 5 days ago. We have the Velvet Underground with their debut album, which is known as Velvet Underground and Nico. Great experimental music, maybe a bit of psychedelia. Of course, you have Lou Reed here. This is where he got to start. I mean, it's a classic album. Definitely didn't. Of course, we know the story. It didn't do well originally, but now it's considered one of the greatest albums of all time. It may not be for everybody. Again, it's very out there for the most part. And, Nico, who also sings on this album, Some people like it, some people don't like it, but I personally like it. But yeah, this is a good album. Sadly, you can't peel the banana on the CD, but if you can still see what it looks like if you just take out the CD. See? That's what it looked like. I know it's not the same, but whatever. At least I have it on CD now. Alright, and the last one I'll show is by The Who. Now The Who, there are two albums that when people talk about them in the 60s, there's two albums that come to mind. To most, this one. Of course, classic album, very important, one of the greatest concept albums of all time. But surprisingly, this is not my favorite. I know, shocking. Maybe even sacrilege. But no, my favorite album by The Who that was released in the 60s is actually The Who Sell Out. Very good. Like, I was really surprised with this one. I don't know, and of course, I still love this album. But the problem is, I think if you listen to them do this album live, I think it sounds a lot better. So obviously, I'm only talking about the studio versions, and the studio version to Tommy is good, but it's very acoustic heavy, and I feel like just not as powerful as they would do it on the live when they did the album live. But here, this is a good album. Very heavy, very good, very heavy, very good. Let's see, what songs in here? You have Armenia, City in the Sky, Marianne with the Shaky Hand, Tattoo, Our Love Was, I Can See for Miles. Classic song there. But yeah, very good. This is kind of like their first kind of concept album before Tommy. This is kind of like their little taste on doing a concept album. But this is a good one right here. Of course, it kind of has the great imagery there, which is very fun to look at. Kind of shows the humor that The Who was kind of known for in some of their songs. But there you have it. That is 30 60s albums. So in the comments section below, I know there are tons more out there. But again, this is all some of my favorites in my collection. So in the comments below, let me know some of your favorites, and I'll make a list of it. And maybe in 2023, maybe I'll acquire them. We'll see. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you in the next video. But again, look out for that YouTube shorts. That'll be the last time you'll see the outfit. But yeah, it'll be kind of nice to go back to regular clothes. But that's it for me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.